Good day everyone, so hope you're all doing really well. In today's video I want to address the Chasca and Mavuika criticisms that a lot of people seem to currently have going around. These criticisms basically take the form that the technology in Natlan is kind of out of place for how it's presented in the other nations. In other words, a lot of people feel that Natlan is not really representative of Genshin impact typically. And some people have even felt that the other things in the lore, for instance, like how Mualani's shark functions and so on, is reasonable, but the moment you got to a gun with some self-propulsion technology or a motorcycle, suddenly this is too immersion breaking and it's kind of harming the reputation of the game. Now, personally, from my perspective, when it comes to these types of criticisms and other similar ones, I really have to question whether these people play the game of Genshin Impact. And I'll give you a simple example. The entire mech, Scaramouche mech boss fight is a massive technological marvel that rivals the power of gods, and it took someone like Nahida to literally matrix his ass 168 times in order for us to beat him. If you think of other pieces of technology, just think of the Raiden Shogun's puppet that is currently ruling in Azuma. This self-sentient or the sentient puppet that's not human, that can just rule a nation by herself, that Raiden herself programmed. It's absolutely crazy. And these are just some feats of engineering. When I go beyond this and I think of Alice and all the witches that created Simulanka, or for instance Venti and Zhongli throwing spears and terraforming land, Genshin Impact in and of itself has always been this very high fantasy world where characters can fly, they can change the blood of creatures to make them human. You've got all of these cool things that happen in the game. So when it comes to something as simple as saying, hey, you've got a character here that uses phlogiston, which is a very important element in the lore, to create propulsion technology, it's not that unbelievable. If you think about it, what's been presented so far is that Shilonen is basically this genius that started off with Mualani's drill. She's always been developing things. She started creating her own rollerblades, then she moved on to Chasca's gun and Mavuika's bike. This is very natural for someone that keeps on inventing things, and by Genshin's own lore standards, this is not anything particularly impressive. I've seen airships in Fontaine. I've seen an entire courthouse delivering sentences, collecting some weird indemnitium and powering an entire nation off of it. That is way more freaking impressive than just some self-propulsion technology. Yes, it might feel as though the presentation and look of the characters might hit a bit too much home. In other words, it might feel as though you've lost that sense of the fantasy, but in terms of the actual technology with respect to the lore of the game, I don't feel it's that much of a leap or a stretch. In fact, I think a lot of people think that there is somehow this massive technological leap from Mondstadt, and then there was a leap all the way to Fontaine, and now there's this massive leap in Natlan, and that's just not the case. If you look at the majority of the people and the tribes that are currently in Natlan, you'll realize that they're not running off of this massive fancy modern futuristic technology. Rather, you've got a sense that there is something unique about each Natlan tribes that powers how they do things. So for example, in the People of the Springs area, you've got the spirit ways, which is much more reflective of their culture. And similarly, you can see in some of the mining areas for the Echoes of the Children how they use the Saurians and some fancy drilling equipment and machinery that Shilonen use to do what they do best, to do the mining. You've got the people, the Canopy of Scions, that have mastered the ability to do quite a lot of like acrobatics and stuff to be able to deliver and be the distribution network of Natlan, etc. It's not like all of them are suddenly flying in rocket spaceships that Shilonen invented. It's not the case at all. If you look at the tribes in Genshin Impact, It's just all of them using what is available to them, and like all the other nations, there is some god, some power, some technology behind it all. For instance, with the sacred sakura, we had a higher power literally create the sacred sakura in time 500 years ago, which is if we get to that mind-bending level of kind of lore, how is a freaking gun in the game gonna be that problematic, especially when you've seen other characters like the Fatui with guns? Yes, how the propulsion mechanics work might be a bit different, but then again, Raiden Shogun can hover in the air. You can see Venti hovering in the air. You've got Mavuika literally having an aerial fight with Capitano, and her standing in the sky ready to like one punch the abyss. Like from that perspective, none of that depended on the technology. So when I look at the lore of Genshin Impact, it's very clear that it is it's a high mix of different civilizations and technology. And what we know about Genshin is that ultimately, if a civilization or nation becomes too advanced, like Conria, then the heavenly principles might take issue with them, because as we saw, the world outside of Tevat seems to be very interesting from when Mavuika blasted the sky, and that in and of itself tells you that the lore is not as straightforward. And all that Hoyo is doing from a commercial perspective is that they are building out the world, they're building out the stories, they've put in elements which are sometimes alien to us, but at other times that are relatable to us, and all of this is to create a game and a story, but also to sell a product if you think about it. So at some point, it's not crazy that I do see characters with things that are relatable to my day-to-day life. If I saw, for instance, Conria way back when, 500 years ago, with alien technology, a lot of people would feel okay with it, even if that technology superseded everything that a flying girl on a gun has in terms of its technological advancement. And I think that's the point that a lot of people have not considered, and hence what I said earlier, the people that level these criticisms don't really seem to understand or play the lore, and they also tend to assume that the appreciation and use of technologies should mirror ours in the world of Genshin, when in fact there is no real good reason for it to do so. In any case, yeah, I'm getting kind of tired of kind of explaining all of this, but from my perspective, there's nothing wrong with the black branding and stuff, and as I explained in my Shalonen video, the only real problem I've got is that Hoyo can sometimes focus too much on selling you a character before really giving you a sense of what their personalities are. So that's just where the commercial aspect can sometimes fail them, but that is an entirely separate criticism. Alright, I've talked enough, I'm getting tired. Thank you so much for watching and have a great day. Cheers.